Hey folks, today we're going to be talking about creating a prayer service at home with your kids. It can be quite the undertaking for some of us. We come from various contexts. Some may have one child, some may have multiple children, some may have infants, some may have teenagers, some may have calm children, some may have rambunctious children, all sorts of different ways that our families are put together. And we're all trying to put together a prayer service at home with our children. My context is praying the daily office of the Anglican Church, morning prayer and or evening prayer. But everything I'm going to say today will apply to us and be helpful whether you come from an Eastern Orthodox, a Roman Catholic, or a Protestant background. I'd like for you to subscribe to the channel if you could. We're going to be creating more of these video casts to talk about prayer in the household. So let's get started. So praying at home with your children, it's a big deal. I think you're going about a noble task of preparing your children to learn how to pray respectfully, to learn all sorts of different ways of praying and coming to the Lord with their thoughts and their concerns and all sorts of other things. The one thing that I would like to try to encourage you most of all, and we're going to go over I'm going to say this a lot in the course of this video, is to see prayer at home, see doing the daily office at home, first and foremost as an activity that you do together, an activity, and an offering to God as an activity. I think a lot of times we approach this sort of thing with sort of the expectation of like school or Sunday school, where we're going to have a reading and we want to make sure that our children got something out of it. We want to get something out of it ourselves. But in the end, we can't control that. We can't control whether we get anything out of it. That's God's business. We can't control whether our children get anything out of it. That's God's business. We can't even control whether they pay attention, because that's in their own mind. And if we set ourselves up by measuring that sort of thing, it's going to be a frustrating task. But if we see it as an activity that our families can do together, and then our primary assessment of our success is whether we did the activity. And we can begin to try to do the activity. We might do it better according to the standards that we set for our household, and we'll talk about some of those in a little bit. But if we see it primarily as an activity, I think we have a lot better chance at success, because we will see it as completing the activity, doing it, making the offering to God. You can see simply gathering the family and saying the daily office or whatever it may be for you as the offering you make to God. And you can do that. You can control whether you actually do the service. So we're going to talk a lot about making it an activity that your family does together. And as you think about the activity, a couple things to think about is you are at your house or wherever you might be. You may be outside, you may be in the park, you may be on a road trip in a hotel. Don't try to make it some imagined idea of what holy is. Holiness is brought to you by God being present with you. There are certain things that are wonderful to do when the church gathers. Things like the way that we dress, the things like incense or icons or candles and all that sort of thing, and that's wonderful. And we're going to talk in another video about creating a prayer space, and we'll cover more about that there. But in our house, Erica and I do morning prayer in what we slept in, and that's just the reality of it. You know, the part of seeing it as an activity that you offer to God is you're just offering yourself, whatever that is. Sundays, of course, it's nice to get dressed up in our best, to offer our best of what we have to God, and we do that in worship normally. And right now, in the time of the pandemic, we might not be able to do that. Most of us can't. But we can perhaps make Sundays gathering for the family office something special, and you dress up for that. But the daily thing, the day-to-day thing, that's just doing the activity with whatever you got, wherever you are. And I want you to think of it that way. And another thing that I want you to be thinking about is don't get discouraged if your kids act like kids. That's what they are. And there's going to be times, especially in the beginning, especially if they're new to this sort of thing, where they don't know how to act, and they might be trying to do somersaults in the middle of it. They might be trying to tickle their sibling or whatever it might be. They might be doing all sorts of things that can be kind of infuriating. Of course, I mean, we're parents, right? And we just think that our children should know better, and sometimes they probably should. But they're going to act like kids, and expect that. You can work towards helping them to be respectful, and we're going to talk about that also in just a second. But expect them to act like children, and don't get frustrated when they do. The last thing that we want is for this activity to be the time when mom or dad becomes a monster. We want to make sure that we make this activity something that the family looks forward to doing. So once again, kind of as we're thinking of it as an activity, we're not focusing on whether or not we get something out of it. We're not focusing on whether I get something out of it, whether my child got something out of it. We can't control that. That's God's business to control. But we can control whether we do it. And you can't control what your kids are thinking and what they're doing, but you can control whether they do it. So let's talk about some things that we can do. First of all, before you even get started, you should plan in advance what you're going to do. Are you going to do the whole official daily office service? Are you going to do a shortened version of it? How are you going to do it? Are you going to have one person lead the whole thing? Are you going to have one person read and another person lead? Are you going to maybe listen to the podcast? I have the podcast of the Daily Office that comes out every day, twice a day at thetrinitymission.org, and maybe for a while you're just going to listen to the podcast as a family, and that might be a good thing to do. It might be a way for mom and dad, or whichever is available, to be there at prayer, to demonstrate what it looks like for everyone else to participate, so that when whoever mom or dad is leading the service, your children have had an example of what it looks like to participate in the service properly. And so that can be a good thing as well. But whatever it is, think in advance about how you're going to do it, so that you can do it well when you get there. Once again, you can't control whether or not they get something out of it, but you can, let's talk about what we can do. We can set some expectations for your child, and depending on their age, there would be different ways that we set expectations. In our house, for our daughter, we ask her to be quiet, to be respectful, and to participate in the parts that she knows how to do. And so when you give those sort of expectations, the ones that are not as clear or maybe a little more abstract, it's helpful to give, like, what does that look like for your child? So be quiet. She knows what that looks like. We also include kind of to be still, for her body to be quiet, which is for our daughter, for probably a lot of your children, that's a very difficult thing to do, for her to be still. But we try to work on that as much as possible. Sometimes it helps just to have her sit in mine or Erica's lap, and that way she can get some help being still. Being respectful is a little more abstract, so we try to be very clear on what it means for her to be respectful. And what way we explain that is that it's part of it is being quiet, and part of it is participating in the things that she knows how to do. And then it's also doing a couple actions with the family at the right time. And so things like making the sign of the cross, we actually give her a particular way to hold her hand to do that, so that she's not just kind of doing whatever and has the opportunity to be silly and not know that she's being silly. And so we tell her a particular way to do it, and we demonstrate that being respectful is not, trying to make a really fast, silly cross, or when we tell her to slow it down to, your kid would probably do this too. She goes into slow motion and thinks that it's funny to do it slow motion. We explain to her that it's to do it at the same pace that mama and daddy are doing the cross, and to do it respectfully. So we're trying to be very clear on what it looks like for her to be respectful. And that means to do her cross well, and to participate in what she knows and to be quiet and still. So if you're going to I recommend that you give your kids clear expectations on what it looks like for them to participate well in the activity, and that way you have something that you can move them toward, a standard towards which you can move them. They're never going to be perfectly there, and if they're there today, they're not going to be there tomorrow. That's the reality, right? Another good thing to do is recognizing that it is an activity. Involve them as much as possible, not just making a sign of the cross or bowing or whatever, but perhaps if they're old enough to read, let them read. If they're not, maybe they can hold a Bible until it's time for you to read. Maybe you have a candle, and we have icons in the candle, and we're going to make another video about, like I said, about creating a prayer space, and you can involve them in that as well. But you might have a candle that one of them gets to light and another one gets to extinguish after the end, or all sorts of things. Every family has to figure this out differently for themselves, but I think you can figure that out. But the main thing, once again, to recap, is to think of it as an activity that you do together. To plan in advance what you're going to do, to be clear in your expectations of how your expectation of how your child should act during the activity together, to be clear in what that looks like, and then to involve them as much as you possibly can. May God bless you as you go about the noble task of training your children to participate in the prayers of the church, the prayers that we've been praying for thousands of years. It's a big deal, and I'm excited to see what will happen. If this video has been helpful, we're going to be coming out with other videos. Love if you could push subscribe in there, and maybe like it, and share it. If you're on social media, share it and suggest others to watch it. Thanks a lot. God bless.